I was driving through the suburbs the other day, just one of those standard sprawling subdivisions, and I had this moment of, I guess you'd call it architectural deja vu.
Hmm.
You look at the setback of the lawns, the width of the driveway, the fact that the nearest gallon of milk is exactly an 8-minute drive away, and you realize none of this is accidental.
Far from it. No, it's arguably the most intentional design project in human history.
But we usually think of cities as these organic beasts, right?
Right.
Like they just sort of happen. People built houses, then a shop opened up, then a road. But looking at this stack of research you sent over, the articles, the legal history, the international comparisons, it's clear that organic died a long time ago. We are living inside a script.
We are. And the scriptwriter is a concept that is simultaneously the most boring word in the English language and the most powerful force in your daily life.
Zoning.
Zoning.
It sounds like the title of a spreadsheet that won't load.
Mhm.
But our mission for this deep dive is to prove that zoning is actually the invisible hand that shapes everything. It decides who your neighbors are, how fat your wallet is, how much carbon you emit, and this is the part that really surprised me.
Yeah.
It might even determine the GDP of the entire country.
It's the operating system of the built environment.
Yeah.
And like any operating system, when it's working, you don't notice it.
Right.
But when it crashes, or when the code is bad,
Right.
you get dysfunction, you get inequality, you get gridlock.
So before we get into the heavy stuff, the segregation, the economics, the bagoom factories.
We have to talk about the bagoon factories.
We do. But first, we need to define our terms. Because I think a lot of people, myself included, conflate zoning with building codes. They seem like the same bureaucratic red tape.
They are cousins, but they do very different jobs. I mean, think of a building code as the engineering manual. It tells you how to build.
Okay.
It says, you need this much rebar in the concrete, or you need a fire exit here, or the wiring must be copper. It is purely about safety and structural integrity. If a building code fails, the roof falls on your head.
Right. So building codes prevent gravity and fire from killing me. Pretty straightforward.
Exactly. Zoning, on the other hand, is about land use.
Yeah.
It doesn't care if your wiring is up to code. It cares about what that building is doing and where it sits in relation to everyone else.
So it's the social layer on top of the engineering layer.
That's a great way to put it. Zoning asks, is this a house? Is it a factory? Is it a park? How tall is it? How far back from the street is it?
So building codes stop the house from burning down. Zoning stops me from turning that house into a slaughterhouse.
Precisely. And that distinction is vital because zoning is a social tool. It's about the collective arrangement of the community. It's the rule book that says these activities happen here and those activities happen there.
And we have a lot of ground to cover today. We're basing this deep dive on a massive synthesis of sources, centering on the comprehensive history and mechanics of zoning from the Wikipedia archives, but pulling in economic studies and legal case law.
It's a huge topic.
It really is. We're going to look at the ancient origins, the dark side American zoning history, the toolkit planners use, and then my favorite part, how the rest of the world does it completely differently.
Oh, the international comparison is where you really see how arbitrary our American system is. It's really eye-opening.
So let's rewind way back. I assume zoning was a 20th century invention. I pictured it arriving with the Model T4 and the skyscraper, but the research suggests this impulse to separate things is much, much older.
It's ancient. As long as humans have been clustering together in cities, we've had to deal with the bad neighbor problem.
Well,
If you look at the walled cities of antiquity, zoning was dictated by the walls themselves.
it was binary, inside versus outside. Simple as that.
Basically, the logic wasn't about property values or traffic flow. It was primal. It was about noise and smell, the U factor.
Right. Because in 1000 BC, industry wasn't a guy with a laptop. It was messy.
It was visceral. Tanning leather involves soaking hides in, urine and lime. Brick firing creates massive amounts of smoke. Slaughtering animals is bloody and attracts pests.
Not stuff you want next to the temple.
Not at all. So in the Zhou dynasty in China, or the Vedic era in India, the rule was simple. The clean stuff, temples, palaces, homes, goes inside the walls. The dirty stuff, the tanneries, the kilns, the graveyards, goes outside.
It's the original NIMBYism. Not in my walled city.
You could absolutely say that.
Yeah.
The Roman military camps were another example. They were incredibly standardized. You could drop a Roman soldier into a camp in Britannia or Syria, and he would know exactly where the hospital was, where the commander slept, and where the horses were kept. That is zoning in its purest form organization for efficiency.
Okay, so for a few thousand years, the logic is clean versus dirty. But then we hit the Industrial Revolution, and the definition of dirty changes. It gets bigger.
It gets industrial. This is the pivotal moment. Before the Industrial Revolution, a lot of production was cottage industry. You might weave cloth in your living room. You might make shoes in your kitchen. Home and work were the same place.
The original work from home.
Exactly. But when you move to steam power and mass production, you can't have a Bessemer steel converter in your kitchen. It's just not going to fit.
Right.
Industry had to scale up, and it became dangerous. You had massive factories belching coal smoke, loud machinery, toxic runoff.
And initially, in places like London or Manchester, these factories were jammed right next to the tenements where people lived.
And it was a public health disaster: cholera, respiratory disease, squalor. I mean, it was just horrific. This forced society to rethink the city. We realized we couldn't just let cities grow organically anymore. We needed to intervene.
Yeah.
We needed to separate the housing from the smokestacks.
This leads us to the Garden City. The notes mention Adelaide, Australia, which seems like a weird place for urban planning history to start.
It's actually a critical milestone. In 1836, Colonel William Light designed Adelaide. He didn't just lay out a grid, he created a city center and completely surrounded it with parklands,
A greenbelt.
a literal physical buffer of green space. And he said the suburbs go outside the greenbelt. He legally defined where the city stopped and nature began. This was revolutionary.
And this catches on.
It inspires a guy named Ebenezer Howard in the UK to start the Garden City movement. He saw Adelaide and thought, that's it. He envisioned cities as these neat concentric rings, public buildings in the middle, then parks, then housing, then agriculture on the outside.
It sounds very utopian, very orderly.
It was, and it gave us the visual template for the modern suburb. But while the British were dreaming of garden cities, the Americans were figuring out how to enforce this separation legally. And this is where the story gets complicated.
Complicated and, frankly, a little dark. We need to talk about the American origin story of zoning. The standard textbook narrative points to New York City in 1916, right? The Equitable Building.
That's the clean version of the story, the sanitized version. The Equitable Building was this massive skyscraper in Lower Manhattan that went straight up from the sidewalk, a sheer cliff.
No setbacks.
None. It blocked the sun for acres. People were terrified that the city would become a dark, windswept canyon. So New York passed the 1916 zoning resolution to force buildings to step back. The wedding cake architecture you see in old skyscrapers.
Right. Strictly about light and air. Very noble. It sounds like a good thing.
It was. But if you dig deeper into legal history, the first true zoning ordinance in the U.S. wasn't in New York. It was in Modesto, California in 1885. And it wasn't about skyscrapers.
It was about laundries.
Specifically washhouses.
Yeah.
The ordinance made it illegal to operate a laundry in certain areas of the city. Now, on the surface, they argued it was about fire safety laundries, used wooden fires, chemicals, etc. It was a public nuisance argument.
But that wasn't the real reason.
The historical record is very clear on the intent here. Who owned the laundries in 1885 California?
Chinese immigrants.
Almost exclusively. The ordinance was designed to prevent Chinese business owners from expanding into white neighborhoods. It was a tool of segregation, disguised as a safety regulation.
That is a crucial distinction. We often assume regulations are these neutral, benevolent rules. But here, the very first tool in the zoning toolkit was weaponized for exclusion.
And that tension between safety and exclusion never really goes away. It flows right into the big Supreme Court case that legitimized zoning nationwide. Village of Euclid, Ohio v. Ambler Realty Co. in 1926.
Euclid, that's why we call it Euclidean zoning. I always thought it was named after the geometry guy because of the squares on the map.
A common mistake, but no, it's named after the town of Euclid, a suburb of Cleveland. Here's the setup. Ambler Realty owned a bunch of land. They wanted to build industry factories, maybe some shops.
The highest and best use for their land, economically speaking.
Absolutely. The village of Euclid said, no, we are zoning this for residential use only. Single-family homes, to be precise.
And Ambler sued, arguing that the city was effectively stealing their money. Industrial land is worth way more than residential land. By zoning it residential, the city destroyed the land's value.
Exactly. They argued it was an unconstitutional taking of property without just compensation. The Supreme Court had to decide, Does a municipality have the right to tell a private landowner, you can't do that, simply to maintain the character of the neighborhood?
And the court said yes.
I said yes. Justice Sutherland wrote the opinion, and he used a very specific and now very infamous analogy. He called apartment buildings in single-family neighborhoods parasites.
Oof. Parasites. That's not subtle.
Not at all. He argued that they block the sun, they bring noise, they interrupt the peace. He literally wrote a nuisance, which should be restrained. This cemented the idea that single-family housing is the highest and purest use of land, and everything else, apartments, stores, factories, is a nuisance that needs to be kept away.
So Euclid gave every town in America the green light to draw lines on a map and say, houses here, stores there, factories way over there.
And that brings us to the dominant model we live with today, Euclidean zoning.
Let's break down what Euclidean zoning actually feels like on the ground. Because we're so used to it, I don't think we realize how strange it is historically.
It creates a landscape of extreme separation. In a Euclidean system, you have strict categories: residential, commercial, industrial, and usually they are mutually exclusive.
The color-coded maps, yellow for houses, red for stores, purple for factories.
Exactly. And if you are in R1, which is residential zone 1, you can build a house. You cannot build a corner store. You cannot build a dentist's office. You cannot build a duplex, just a single-family detached house.
This is why we have the donut city effect in so many U.S. cities. The downtown business district empties out at 5 p.m., and the suburbs are empty at 11 a.m.
It mandates a monoculture. It assumes that a house and a loaf of bread are incompatible. To buy the bread, you must leave the residential zone, enter the transit corridor, the road, and go to the commercial zone.
It effectively mandates the car.
It makes the car a prerequisite for participation in society. If you can't drive, you are functionally excluded from large parts of the city.
But not everyone bought into this, right? I mean, there had to be a backlash. And this is where we have to talk about Jane Jacob.
The patron saint of the messy city.
She hated this separation.
She loathed it. In her book, The Death and Life of Great American Cities, which came out in 1961, she argued that this rational planning was actually killing the spirit of the city. It was creating something that looked nice on a map, but was terrible to live in.
And her famous concept was eyes on the street.
Eyes on the street. Unpack that for us.
She observed that in her neighborhood, Greenwich Village in New York, it was safe and vibrant because it was mixed. You had apartments above shops. You had bars next to libraries. You had little workshops next to homes.
There were always people around.
Always. Because of that mix, the sidewalk was always active. The shopkeepers watched the street in the morning. The office workers watched it at lunch. The residents watched it in the afternoon. The bar patrons watched it at night. This natural surveillance kept the peace better than any police force.
Contrast that with a Euclidean suburb. If everyone leaves for work at 9 a.m., the neighborhood is a ghost town. No eyes on the street. It's an invitation for crime or just soul-crushing boredom.
Exactly. She argued that by separating uses, we were creating dangerous, sterile environments. Her work laid the foundation for what we now call mixed-use zoning and new urbanism.
Which is the attempt to put the toothpaste back in the tube, trying to recreate that small-town Main Street feel where you can live above the bookstore.
It's the antidote to Euclid. Mixed-use zoning explicitly permits and even encourages combining residential, commercial, and cultural uses in the same building or block.
But zoning isn't just about use. The outline highlights a shift towards form and performance. This seems a bit more abstract.
It's a philosophical shift. Euclidean zoning asks, what happens inside the building? Is it a home, a store, a factory?
Right.
Form-based zoning asks, what does the building look like? How does it relate to the street and its neighbors? Wait, so form-based codes care about the container, not the contents?
Correct. A form-based code might say, any building on this street must be 4 stories tall, built right up to the sidewalk, with 50% of the ground floor being glass windows.
And if I want to put a yoga studio in there, fine. A lawyer, fine. An apartment, fine. As long as it fits the physical rules?
As long as the form respects the neighborhood character. The goal is to create a pleasant, walkable public realm, and they believe the use will sort itself out.
The classic example of this, though it predates the term, is Paris.
Absolutely. Paris is incredibly uniform. That's why it's so beautiful.
That uniformity is law. Paris has strict height limits and facade rules, largely thanks to Haussmann's renovations in the 19th century. They realized that if they allowed modern skyscrapers to pop up randomly, it would destroy the Parisian feel.
But they do have skyscrapers. I've seen pictures of that one big black tower, the Montparnasse Tower.
Ah, the Tour Montparnasse. Built in 1973, It is a monolithic 210-meter black skyscraper right in the middle of the low-rise city. It is almost universally hated by Parisians. It sticks out like a sore thumb. I've seen it. It really does.
It was such a visual and architectural disaster for the skyline that 2 years later, the city banned buildings over 7 stories in the center. They pushed all future high-rises out to a dedicated business district, La Défense.
It's often said the best view in Paris is from the top of the Montparnasse Tower.
Because it's the only place where you can't see the tower.
That's brutal, but it proves the point. Bad form can ruin a city just as much as bad use.
Then you have the third type, performance zoning or impact zoning. This is the most logical scientific approach. It says, we don't care what you build or even what it looks like as long as it doesn't break the environment or overload the infrastructure.
So instead of saying no factories, it says no noise above 50 decibels. Or no water runoff greater than X gallons per hour.
Exactly. It uses a points system. You manage your sewage. Points. You mitigate traffic. Points. You provide affordable housing. Points. If you get enough points, you get your permit.
That sounds incredibly sensible. Why don't we do that everywhere? It seems so rational.
Because it's a bureaucratic nightmare. Who measures the decibels? Who predicts the traffic? It requires a massive amount of technical study for every single project. It slows development to a crawl because every building becomes a science experiment.
So it's logical but impractical at scale.
For most cities, yes. It's just too complex and expensive to administer fairly.
So we're stuck with the simpler, blunter tools. Speaking of tools, let's open up the zoning toolkit. Because as I read through the source material, I realized planners have come up with some very creative and sometimes shady ways to bend the rules.
The mechanics of zoning. This is where the rubber meets the road.
Let's start with incentive zoning. This feels like a negotiation.
It is a transaction. It's a deal. The city says to a developer, the zoning map says you can only build 10 stories here. But if you build a public plaza at the bottom, or you include a daycare, or you fix the subway station entrance, we'll let you build 15 stories.
They're selling the air.
Critics would say they are selling the integrity of the plan. They are selling zoning rights. If the infrastructure can't handle a 15-story building, why are you allowing it just because they built a plaza?
But supporters would say what?
Supporters say it's the only way to get private developers to pay for public goods in an era of tight city budgets.
Then there's TDRs, transferable development rights. This concept blew my mind. It's like carbon credits, but for concrete.
Yeah, it's fascinating. In the U.S. property system, owning land gives you a bundle of rights. One of those is the right to build up to the zoning limit. Let's say you own a historic theater. It's only 2 stories tall. But the zoning allows for 40 stories.
So I have 38 stories of invisible skyscraper that I'm not using.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you can't use them because you can't tear down the historic theater. With TDRs, the city lets you sever those air rights from your land and sell them to the guy across the street.
Hold on, let me get this straight. You can sell the air.
You can sell the development potential.
Yeah.
The guy across the street, who is capped at 40 stories, buys your 38 stories and builds a 78-story mega tower.
Yeah, I get paid.
You get paid, which gives you the money to maintain the historic theater. He gets his tower, and the city keeps the same total density. It's just shifted from your lot to his.
So it preserves landmarks?
Or farmland. It's often used to save open space. Farmers in a rural sending zone sell their development rights to developers in an urban receiving zone. The farm stays a farm forever.
It's clever. But then we have the ugly tools, spot zoning.
Spot zoning is the black sheep. This is when a city council takes one specific lot, maybe owned by a friend or a major donor, and changes the zoning just for that lot in a way that makes no sense with the surroundings.
This is a quiet residential street, but this lot can be a 24-hour gas station.
Exactly. It's zoning for a single parcel that's inconsistent with the comprehensive plan. It's frequently overturned in court because it's arbitrary and looks like corruption. It violates the principle that zoning should be applied uniformly.
And the most cynical one of all, fiscal zoning. This explains so much about American suburbia.
This is the root of many evils. In the U.S., local municipalities are funded largely by property taxes, but they also have to pay for services. Schools, police, roads.
And schools are expensive.
Very expensive. So if you are a town planner, you do the math. A shopping mall pays huge property taxes and sends 0 children to school. Pure profit.
A rateable.
Right. A big office park is another great rateable. A subdivision of starter homes, on the other hand, brings in modest taxes but sends hundreds of kids to school. That's a financial loss for the town.
So the town zones everything for commercial or light industrial and bans affordable housing just to balance the budget. They try to attract uses that generate taxes and repel uses that consume services.
Exactly. They zone for ratables, taxable assets, and zone out families. It's why you see huge office parks sitting empty while people can't find a place to live. The zoning map is being used as a budget spreadsheet.
We've also got pattern zoning here in the toolkit, which seems a bit more hopeful.
It is. This is a strategy to combat the housing shortage. Instead of a developer spending a fortune on custom architectural drawings that might get rejected, the city provides a pattern book.
A menu, like ordering a combo meal.
A menu of pre-approved designs. Here are 3 styles of duplexes, 2 styles of fourplexes. If you choose one of these patterns, your permit is expedited. You skip the line.
That makes a ton of sense for filling in the missing middle, those small apartment buildings that fit into neighborhoods but are usually illegal to build.
It reduces the risk for builders and lowers the cost of housing. It's a return to how we used to build, like the Sears catalog homes of the early 1900s.
Okay, so that's the U.S. toolkit. And honestly, it feels a bit depressing. It feels rigid and easily manipulated. But the most eye-opening part of this research was looking abroad, because I assumed the whole world did it the Euclidean way.
Oh, absolutely not. The U.S. is an outlier.
Yeah.
If you want to see a completely different philosophy, you have to look at Japan.
Tell me about Japan. Because Tokyo looks chaotic, but it functions incredibly well.
Japan uses what we call inclusive zoning. In the U.S., our zoning is exclusive. If it's residential, it's only residential. In Japan, they use maximum nuisance limits.
What does that mean in practice?
It means that in a lower zone, you can almost always do the higher zone's activity. So in an industrial zone in Japan, you can build a factory, but you can also build a house. In a commercial zone, you can build a department store, but you can also build an apartment.
Wait, so I can legally build a house next to a factory?
Yes. The Japanese philosophy is, if you want to live next to a factory, that's your choice. We won't stop you. But the reverse is not true. You cannot build a factory in a low-rise residential zone. It's a one-way hierarchy of nuisance.
That explains the texture of Japanese cities. You turn a corner and there's a quiet house, next to a ramen shop, next to a small workshop.
It creates incredible density and convenience. It allows the city to evolve organically. If a neighborhood needs more shops, houses can slowly convert to shops. In the U.S., that would require a massive legal battle to change the zoning map. In Japan, it just happens.
And they don't have the same Mbappé power, right? The local homeowners can't block everything.
No. Zoning is controlled at the national level in Japan.
Oh.
A local neighborhood in Tokyo can't just vote to ban apartment buildings because they don't like the look of them. The national government sets the standard. If it fits the box, you can build it.
And they focus on form, too.
Yes, they rely on sunshine laws, heavily. Instead of worrying about use, they worry about light. The building envelope is shaped by angles to ensure that shadows don't perpetually cover the neighbor's property. It results in those interesting slanted roofs you see in anime or Tokyo photos.
Contrast that with the UK. I was shocked to read that the UK doesn't have zoning maps at all.
Correct. The British system is discretionary. They don't have by right development.
By right means if I follow the rules, I get the permit automatically.
Yes. In the U.S. or Japan, if the map says commercial and I draw a store that meets the code, the city must give me the permit. It's a right. In the U.K., almost every development requires planning permission. You submit a proposal, and the local council looks at it and says yes or no.
Based on what?
Based on a local plan and their own judgment. It's extremely subjective. It's a vibe check from the local council.
A vibe check.
Basically, it allows for all the community input, but it creates massive uncertainty. A builder never knows for sure if they can build until the very end of the process.
That must make housing incredibly expensive to build. The risk has to be priced in.
It does.
Right.
The supply of housing in the UK is strictly constrained by this process.
Yeah.
And it's a huge political issue over there.
Now, we have to talk about the anomaly. The city that always gets thrown around in libertarian arguments. Houston, Texas, the city with no zoning.
A famous exception.
Is it true? Is Houston a lawless wasteland where you can build a glee factory next to a kindergarten?
Well, yes and no. It is true that Houston does not have a zoning ordinance. The voters have rejected it multiple times. There's no map that says commercial or residential. But the city is not unplanned. Houston relies heavily on private deed restrictions or covenants. When a developer subdivides land, they write rules into the property deeds. This land can only be used for single-family homes or no business that sells alcohol.
So the government doesn't ban the factory. The private contract bans the factory. It's private zoning.
Exactly. And the city of Houston enforces those private contracts. Plus, they have parking requirements, lot size minimums, and setback rules that act very much like zoning. So if you drive through Houston, it looks surprisingly like Dallas or Phoenix. The mechanism is different, private law versus public law, but the outcome is often similar sprawl.
One last global stop because I love the detail here. The Philippines.
The Philippines is interesting because of how granular they get with industrial zones.
Hmm.
They don't just say factory, they rank them by hazard and nuisance level.
I have the list. Industrial 1 is non-polluting. It says biscuit factories, small watercraft.
Harmless stuff, things you probably wouldn't mind living near.
Industrial 2 gets into polluting things, canning plants, textile mills.
Yes, a bit smellier.
And then Industrial 3, high polluting and hazardous. And the code specifically lists bagoong factories. Bagoong is that fermented fish paste, right? It's famously pungent.
It's pungent, it's delicious, but you do not want to smell it being made 24/7.
I love that the zoning code explicitly acknowledges the smell of fermenting fish as a level 3 hazard. It shows how zoning adapts to the specific culture and economy of a place.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that zoning is ultimately about how people live together without driving each other crazy. What's a nuisance in Manila might not be a nuisance in Munich.
Okay, so we've seen the mechanics, the history, the global variations, but we need to land the plane on why this matters to the listener right now, because we opened by saying zoning determines your commute, your wallet, and your neighbors. Let's prove it.
The consequences. This is where the academic literature gets really damning.
Let's start with the wallet, the economics. There was a study in 2017, Shaya Moretti, that made my jaw drop.
The GDT study. It's a famous one. They looked at the U.S. economy and asked a simple question. How much growth are we losing because people can't move to where the jobs are?
Right. The most productive places in America, New York, San Francisco, Boston are incredibly expensive.
And they are expensive largely because zoning restricts the supply of housing. If you can't build apartments, rent goes up.
Yeah.
It's simple supply and demand. If rent is high, a normal worker, a teacher, a mechanic, a nurse can't afford to move there for a better job. So they stay in a lower productivity area.
And the study found
They estimated that if just 3 cities, New York, San Francisco, and San Jose, relaxed their zoning to be median level, not even Texas level, just average for a U.S. city, U.S. GDP would be 8.9% higher.
almost 9% of GDP. That's trillions of dollars.
Trillions of dollars of wealth that
Yes.
doesn't exist because we won't let people build apartments. Other estimates go up to 12%. That's a massive self-inflicted wound on the economy.
Yeah.
We are locking labor out of the places where it could be most productive.
Then there's the social cost. Segregation. We talked about Modesto and the laundries, but this isn't just 19th century history.
No. Modern zoning is often called exclusionary zoning for a reason.
Yeah.
There's a very strong, statistically significant correlation between strict density limits and racial segregation.
Jonathan Rothwell and Douglas Massey did the big study on this.
They did. They found that in areas where zoning only allows large lots and single-family homes, you have significantly higher racial segregation, even after you control for other factors.
The mechanism is simple. Large lots are expensive. If you ban small lots and apartments, you set a minimum price of entry for the neighborhood.
And because of the history of the racial wealth gap in the U.S., setting a high price of entry effectively filters out minority populations. It's an economic wall that functions just like a racial wall, but it's legal under current law.
And the homeowners defend this wall fiercely.
It's what economists call the home voter hypothesis. Homeowners see their house as their main financial asset. They believe, often incorrectly, that apartments or density will lower their property value. So they show up to city council meetings and scream no at any proposed change.
And envyism. Not in my backyard.
Envyism. It's a cartel behavior. Existing residents collude to restrict supply to boost the value of their own asset at the expense of everyone else, particularly the young and those trying to move in for opportunity.
And finally, there's the human cost. The sheer rigidity of it. The notes mention the Gloversville Free Methodist Church in New York. This story is just awful.
This is a heartbreaking story from 2022. It was freezing, -4 degrees Fahrenheit, dangerously cold. The church wanted to open its doors to let the homeless sleep inside, just to keep them from freezing to death on the street.
A basic act of charity, of human decency.
And the city shut them down. Why? Because the church was in a zone that didn't allow homeless shelters. The zoning code didn't care that people might die. It only cared that the use didn't match the map.
That's when you know the system is broken. When bureaucracy overrides basic humanity, it's the definition of a failed system.
It illustrates the fundamental problem. Zoning is a tool for order, But it often lacks empathy. It lacks common sense. It's a blunt instrument.
So we're left with this duality. Zoning saves us from the tannery next door. It stops the skyscraper from blocking our sun. But it also creates traffic, segregates our cities, and stifles the economy.
It's a powerful tool that has been used bluntly. The shift we are seeing now toward mixed use, toward form-based codes, toward allowing missing middle housing, is an admission that we overcorrected. We tried to turn the city into a machine, and we forgot it's supposed to be a habitat for humans.
We're trying to find our way back to the organic city, but using a better rule book this time.
Exactly. A smarter, more flexible rulebook.
Here's a final thought to leave you with. We started by saying zoning was invented for the Industrial Revolution, to separate the dangerous factory from the peaceful home.
Right.
But today, most of us don't work in dangerous factories. We work in the knowledge economy. My factory fits in my backpack. It's a laptop. It makes no noise, no smoke.
Precisely.
So if the nuisance is gone, if work is clean and quiet, why are we still separating it from our homes? Are we living in cities designed for a 1920s reality that doesn't exist anymore?
I think we are. And I think the cities that figure out how to reintegrate life and work like we used to have before the car, before Euclid, are going to be the winners of the 21st century. They'll be more affordable, more sustainable, and frankly, more interesting places to live.
Something to mull over the next time you're stuck in traffic, driving past a strip mall. And do yourself a favor. Look up your local zoning map.
Yes. Google your town name plus zoning map. It's almost always online.
Find your house. See what color is. Read the code. You might be shocked to find out what you are and aren't allowed to do on your own land.
It's an eye-opener. A real one.
Thanks for listening to this deep dive. We'll catch you on the next one.
Goodbye.